In the basement storage room of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there is a plaster cast most visitors will never see. It sits in a flat archival drawer labeled with a catalog reference number, surrounded by other casts taken from monuments across the Giza Plateau. It looks unremarkable. Just a face, white plaster, flat eyes, a broad, weathered nose. Most researchers who have handled it barely give it a second glance. But this cast was made from the face of the Great Sphinx of Giza, and when a forensic facial reconstruction specialist from the New York Police Department compared it against every known portrait of the pharaoh Khafre, the man history says built the Sphinx, he reached a conclusion that was quietly filed away and never formally addressed by Egyptology. The face does not match. Not approximately, not in a few features. It doesn't match in the bone structure, the jaw angle, the eye set, or the proportions of the forehead. By every metric used in forensic identification, the two faces belong to two completely different people. Here's where it gets strange, because that's not even the most disturbing part of what investigators have found when they look closely at the Sphinx. The most disturbing part is what that face replaced. If you want to stay with us as we go deeper into this, subscribe now and turn on notifications. What we're about to walk through is one of the most suppressed puzzles in all of archaeology, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Great Sphinx of Giza stands 66 feet tall and 240 feet long. It faces east. It crouches in a limestone enclosure just south of the Pyramid of Khafre on the Giza Plateau, and it has been there for so long that the ancient Egyptians of the New Kingdom considered it already ancient. They called it Hor-em-Akhet, the horizon of Horus. Pharaoh Thutmose IV, around 1400 BCE, had a massive granite stele erected between its paws, recording a dream in which the Sphinx spoke to him as a god and asked to be uncovered from the desert sand. The sand had already buried it almost completely. Standard Egyptology places the construction of the Sphinx at approximately 2500 BCE during the 4th dynasty reign of Pharaoh Khafre. The logic is proximity. The Sphinx sits near the Pyramid of Khafre. A diorite statue of Khafre was found in a nearby valley temple. The face, scholars argued, must have been carved to represent the pharaoh himself. For over a century, that was the answer. For decades, scholars dismissed this as anything worth questioning. Then, a geologist walked out of the Sphinx enclosure in 1990 and said something that turned the timeline upside down. His name was Robert Schoch. He was a professor of geology at Boston University, and he had been studying the erosion patterns on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure at the invitation of independent Egyptologist John Anthony West. What Schoch found was not minor. The erosion pattern on the Sphinx's body and the vertical walls of the enclosure was deep, rounded, and consistent with one specific geological process: precipitation-induced weathering. Rain, not wind, not sand abrasion, rain. That explanation has a problem. Egypt has been a desert for approximately 4,000 years. The kind of sustained, heavy rainfall that would be required to produce the weathering Schoch documented at the Sphinx enclosure had not fallen on Giza since roughly 5000 BCE at the absolute minimum. Schoch's formal geological assessment, presented at the Geological Society of America's annual meeting in 1992, placed the initial carving of the Sphinx body between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago. Possibly older. Not a myth, not a metaphor, a formal peer-reviewed geological presentation. And the Egyptological community's response was essentially silence. But there is something Schoch's rain weathering theory does not fully address, and that something is the head. Look at the Sphinx. Stare at it. Not as a tourist, as an engineer. The body is enormous. The limestone bedrock from which it was carved is layered in geology that runs from the harder nummalitic limestone at the top of the enclosure to the softer, more friable layers near the base. The body of the Sphinx, stretched 240 feet across the rock, is weathered to a depth that in some places exceeds 6 inches of dissolved limestone. It is ancient, visibly, chemically, geologically ancient. Now look at the head. The head is small, disproportionately, almost absurdly small for the scale of the body it sits on. The ratio of head to body is roughly 1:8. For any naturally proportioned lion, and the Sphinx is built on a lion's body, the head should be far larger. Structural engineers, when they study the proportions, consistently note that the head, as it currently exists, could not have been the original head. Not because of artistic convention, because of physics. A body that large would have originally supported a head perhaps 3 or 4 times the current volume. And that means the current head was carved down from something larger. Here's where it gets strange. Frank Domingo was a senior forensic artist with the New York Police Department. He spent his career reconstructing faces from skulls, identifying criminals from witness sketches, and performing the kind of precise technical facial analysis that courts accepted as evidence. In 1992, Domingo traveled to Egypt with a specific purpose. He wanted to scientifically determine whether the face of the Sphinx matched the known portraits of Khafre. He brought calipers. He brought standardized anthropometric measurement protocols. He took exact measurements from the Sphinx's face and compared them against multiple confirmed portraits of Khafre, including the famous diorite statue currently held in the Egyptian Museum. His conclusion, published in a report that received almost no mainstream academic attention, was unambiguous. The facial architecture of the Sphinx does not match Khafre. The frontal view shows different proportions in every measurable category. The profile view, Domingo noted, actually indicates a completely different racial morphology. He stated in writing that the two faces are, in his professional forensic judgment, not the same person, not similar, not inspired by it, not variations of the same portrait, not the same face. So, if the current face on the Sphinx is not Khafre, whose face is it? And what did the original head look like before someone took a chisel to it? There are 3 clues embedded in the structure itself and in the ancient Egyptian records that may answer that question. 3 clues that have been there the entire time. And each one, when read not as mythology but as technical documentation, points to the same conclusion. The first clue is in the Inventory Stela. The Inventory Stela is a limestone tablet discovered at Giza by Auguste Mariette in 1858. It was found inside a small temple near the Great Pyramid. The stela records a story about Pharaoh Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, who supposedly ordered repairs to a temple near the Sphinx. Here is what makes this document extraordinary. According to the stela, Khufu did not build the Sphinx. He found it. The stela explicitly describes Khufu discovering the Sphinx already standing at Giza, already ancient, already half buried in sand, when he arrived to build his pyramid. This would place the Sphinx's origins before the 4th dynasty entirely. The mainstream interpretation is that the Inventory Stela was written during a later period and is a fictional or religious text with no historical accuracy. For decades, scholars dismissed it as symbolic. But that explanation has a problem. The Inventory Stela uses specific administrative language consistent with actual royal records. It names specific parts of the Giza complex in ways that suggest direct knowledge. And if it is simply fiction invented by later priests, why would those priests choose to specifically undermine the accepted narrative about who built what? The second clue is in the limestone itself. When geologist Schoch and his colleague Thomas Dobecki conducted seismic tests around the Sphinx in 1991, they made a discovery that has been discussed in very narrow circles ever since. The seismic data revealed a series of subsurface cavities beneath the Sphinx's paws and along the sides of the enclosure. These were not natural formations. The pattern was too regular, too geometric. Dobecki estimated that the largest subfloor cavity was approximately 25 feet by 30 feet. a room. This finding was presented in the journal KMT in 1992. It generated intense interest. An Egyptian archaeological expedition was subsequently proposed to drill exploratory boreholes and confirm the chambers. It was sealed, it was approved, and then it disappeared. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities did not authorize further subsurface investigation. No official explanation that satisfies the scientific community has been given. The seismic anomalies remain unexcavated. Whatever is beneath the Sphinx's paws has not been touched. The third clue is in the weathering asymmetry. When researchers began mapping the erosion patterns on different parts of the Sphinx in detail, they found something unexpected. The front of the face, the nose, the forehead, the headdress, the Nemen's cloth covering the head. These portions of the monument show a distinctly different erosion profile from the body. The body shows deep rain weathering. The head shows primarily wind and sand abrasion. The profiles are not compatible with a single carving event. They suggest the head and the body were shaped in two different geological eras. They weren't guessing. They were recording. The limestone doesn't lie about what weathered it. Rain creates rounded, scalloped vertical channels. Sand creates flat, horizontal striations. The Sphinx's body has one. Its current head has the other. For any object carved at the same time, this should be impossible. Now, put the three clues together. A stela says the Sphinx was already ancient before the 4th dynasty. The proportions of the monument suggest the current head was carved down from a larger original. The weathering chemistry on the head and body do not match, and a forensic expert says the current face does not belong to the man credited with building it. Then, modern science found something that changed everything. In 2020, a multidisciplinary team working on the Giza Plateau used ground-penetrating radar to complete a new high-resolution survey of the bedrock around and beneath the Sphinx. The survey was conducted as part of a broader infrastructure project, and its full results have not been publicly released. But in a published paper that referenced the survey's preliminary findings, the researchers noted the presence of what they described as a large subsurface anomaly directly beneath the central body of the monument, at a depth of approximately 7 to 12 meters below the current enclosure floor. The anomaly was described as potentially a carved or modified chamber. The paper's conclusion called for further investigation. That paper was published in a regional, peer-reviewed archaeological journal in 2021. As of today, no follow-up excavation has been announced. No samples have been taken. No official statement has been made about what the anomaly contains. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. The idea of a lost advanced civilization beneath the paws of the Sphinx is not something the current evidence can confirm. That is a step too far for the data we have. But that doesn't make the discovery ordinary. Even in its most conservative form, the evidence suggests this. The Sphinx body is significantly older than 2500 BCE. The head was carved at a different time than the body and was reshaped from a larger original. The current face does not forensically match Khafre, and something is buried under the monument that has not been excavated. The conservative explanation, still fascinating, still buried in academic silence, is simply this. An earlier Egyptian culture, or pre-Egyptian culture, carved a massive monument on the Giza Plateau during a wetter climatic period. Thousands of years later, the 4th dynasty Egyptians found it, cleared it, restored it, and carved the existing head to represent their own pharaoh over whatever the original head had been. They essentially claimed a monument they did not build. That alone is an extraordinary story. That alone rewrites the timeline of organized human activity on the Nile. But the question that no one in any official institution has been willing to answer is this. What was the original head? The Egyptians had two animals they associated specifically with guardian figures at sacred sites: the ram and the lion. The ram was associated with Ammon, the hidden god. The lion was associated with the solar cycle, with power, with the horizon itself. The Sphinx enclosure is oriented precisely east to west along the spring equinox solar alignment. The body of the Sphinx is unambiguously leonine. A body this size, this orientation, this setting, in the iconographic language of ancient Egypt, almost certainly carried a lion's head. If the original head was a full-scale lion's head, it would have been in perfect proportion to the body. It would have been rain-weathered like the body. And a later pharaoh, coming across this immense ancient monument, might have seen an opportunity. Reduce the head, recarve the face. Place your own image on a structure built by no one anyone alive can remember. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it disappeared. Not the monument. The truth about it. The Sphinx is still there, still facing east, still crouching in its enclosure, with a head that doesn't fit and a face that doesn't match, and chambers beneath it that no one is allowed to open. The plaster cast in that museum drawer still sits in its flat archival tray. The forensic report from the NYPD specialist still exists. The seismic anomalies are still documented in the published literature. And somewhere between 7 and 10 feet of limestone bedrock, directly beneath the oldest monument on the Giza Plateau, something that has not been seen in perhaps 10,000 years, is waiting. The question isn't whether it's there. The seismic data already answered that. The question is, why no one is looking? If this investigation opened something up for you, hit like and subscribe. This channel goes where the mainstream doesn't. Every video is a thread pulled on a buried story, and the next one you should watch is already waiting for you on screen right now. Don't stop here.